Maya Johnson walked into Prestige Motors on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, one hand resting on her 8-month pregnant belly. The showroom gleamed with polished luxury vehicles under bright lights, their perfect surfaces reflecting the overhead chandeliers. She paused at the entrance, taking in the impressive display of high-end cars with their sleek lines and intimidating price tags. She had come straight from her volunteer shift at the local community center, dressed in comfortable black maternity leggings and an oversized sweater that stretched over her round belly. Her natural curly hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup after the long morning. Maya hadn't planned to visit the dealership today, but her husband had insisted she start looking at safer, more family-friendly vehicles before the baby arrived. As she stepped further into the showroom, Maya noticed several salespeople engaged with other customers. One woman in particular, tall, blonde, and impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, kept glancing in Maya's direction but made no move to approach. Instead, the saleswoman leaned closer to her current client, a middle-aged white man examining a sports car, and whispered something that made him chuckle while looking Maya's way. Maya took a deep breath and walked toward the newest sedan model that had caught her eye online, a luxury vehicle with top safety ratings and all the features her husband had researched. The midnight blue paint seemed to shimmer under the showroom lights, and Maya carefully ran her fingers along the smooth hood. "Excuse me," she called politely to the blonde saleswoman who was now finishing up with her customer. "Could I get some information about this model?" The saleswoman, whose name tag read Victoria, gave Maya a quick once-over before responding with a tight smile. "Of course. Let me just finish with this gentleman." Maya nodded and continued admiring the car while waiting. She opened the driver's side door and carefully lowered herself into the buttery leather seat, imagining driving her newborn home from the hospital in such comfort and safety. "I wouldn't get too comfortable in there," came Victoria's voice, sharper now that her other customer had moved on. "That's our premium luxury line. The starting price is well beyond most budgets at $89,000. Maya smiled politely. "Yes, I've done some research on it. I'm particularly interested in the safety features." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable looking at our pre-owned economy section? I can direct you there if you'd like." She gestured toward a separate lot visible through the windows where older, less expensive models were parked. "No, thank you. I'm interested in this one," Maya replied firmly, though she could feel heat rising to her cheeks. "Could you tell me about the collision avoidance system?" Victoria sighed almost imperceptibly. "It has all the standard safety features." She waved her hand dismissively without offering specifics. "But honestly, the financing requirements are quite stringent. We require excellent credit scores and substantial income verification." Her eyes flicked to Maya's simple wedding ring and casual attire. By now, a few other customers had begun to notice the interaction. An older couple exchanged uncomfortable glances, while a businessman in a suit seemed to be deliberately focusing on a brochure to avoid watching the uncomfortable scene. "I understand," Maya said, maintaining her composure despite the growing knot in her stomach. "But I'm still interested in learning about the vehicle's specifications. Does this model come with the advanced driver assistance package? And what about the extended warranty options?" Victoria seemed taken aback by the technical questions. She fumbled with the product information sheet she was holding. Well, yes, it has driver assistance, but again, perhaps we should discuss whether this vehicle is the right fit for someone in your situation." Maya felt her baby kick as if responding to her rising stress levels. She took another deep breath, reminding herself to stay calm for the baby's sake. "And what situation would that be exactly?" she asked, her voice steady but with an edge of steel beneath. Victoria lowered her voice, leaning in slightly. "Look, I've been doing this for 15 years. I can tell when someone is just browsing for fun versus serious shopping. These vehicles require substantial down payments and monthly financing that can run over $100 to $200 per month. I'm just trying to save us both some time." The showroom had grown quieter now, with several people openly watching the exchange. Maya felt simultaneously exposed and invisible, seen only through the lens of Victoria's assumptions about her race and appearance, yet her actual identity completely unseen. "I see," Maya said, struggling to maintain her dignity. "And you've determined my financial situation based on—" "What exactly?" Victoria's smile tightened further. "Experience, as I said. Look, If you're really interested, I'd need to see proof of income and run a credit check before we could even discuss a test drive. Company policy for vehicles in this price range. She gestured vaguely toward a sign about test drives, though nothing on it mentioned income requirements. Maya slowly rose from the driver's seat, one hand supporting her back as she straightened up. The baby shifted again, pressing against her ribs uncomfortably. She considered walking out, calling her husband to vent about the humiliating experience and never returning to this dealership. But something made her stand her ground. "I'd like to speak with your manager, please," she said quietly. Victoria's expression flickered between annoyance and concern. "My manager is quite busy at the moment. If you'd like to leave your contact information, perhaps someone could call you next week to discuss more appropriate options." The older couple who had been watching now moved closer to another salesperson, whispering and gesturing toward Maya and Victoria. The businessman who had been pretending not to listen looked up from his brochure with a frown. "I'm happy to wait," Maya insisted, lowering herself carefully into a nearby chair in the customer lounge area. "I have plenty of time today." Victoria seemed about to object further when the showroom doors slid open. Maya glanced up, relief washing over her face as she saw the familiar figure of her husband entering the dealership. He was dressed in a casual but expensive charcoal suit with no tie, having come straight from his office downtown. His warm brown skin glowed under the showroom lights as he scanned the space, quickly spotting Maya. "There you are," he called out with a warm smile, striding toward her. "Sorry I'm late. That investor call ran longer than expected." Victoria watched his approach with growing confusion, taking in his tailored suit, designer watch, and confident demeanor. Her expression shifted subtly as she registered that this well-dressed black man was clearly connected to Maya. "No problem," Maya replied as he reached her side and bent to kiss her cheek. "I was just getting acquainted with the sales process here. This is Victoria. She was explaining to me that I might be more comfortable looking at the pre-owned economy section instead of this model." Her husband's eyebrows rose slightly as he turned toward Victoria, whose face had now drained of color. "Is that so?" he asked, his tone pleasant but with an undercurrent that suggested he understood exactly what had been happening. "That's interesting, considering we specifically researched this model for its safety ratings and called ahead to make sure it was available to view today." Victoria swallowed hard, her confident demeanor crumbling. There must have been some misunderstanding. I was simply explaining our various options to your wife." "My pregnant wife, yes," he corrected with a pointed look, "who came here at my request to begin looking at our options for a family vehicle. I believe she asked you some specific questions about the safety features." Around them, the showroom had grown uncomfortably quiet, with even other salespeople pausing their conversations to observe the situation unfolding. Victoria shifted her weight nervously, suddenly aware of the audience. "Of course, sir. I'd be happy to go over all the features in detail now that you're here," she said with a brightness that hadn't been present during her interaction with Maya alone. Maya's husband tilted his head slightly. "I'm curious why that information wasn't available to my wife before I arrived," he said calmly. "Did she not ask the same questions?" Victoria's mouth opened and closed without producing words. The tension in the showroom grew thicker by the second. Victoria stood frozen, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the product brochure she held. The showroom's bright lights suddenly felt like spotlights on a stage where she was performing poorly. Maya's husband waited patiently for her response, his calm demeanor somehow more intimidating than if he'd been angry. "Well," Victoria finally managed, "I was just about to go over those details with her." Her voice had lost its earlier condescending edge, replaced by a nervous tremor. Maya shifted uncomfortably in her chair. The baby kicked again as if sensing the tension in the room. She placed a gentle hand on her belly and took a deep breath. "That's not what happened," said an unexpected voice from nearby. The older gentleman who had been watching the interaction stepped forward. His gray hair and kind eyes gave him a grandfatherly appearance as he approached Maya and her husband. "I've been sitting here for 20 minutes and this young lady," he nodded toward Maya, "asked several specific questions that were brushed aside." Victoria's face flushed red. "Sir, I don't think you heard—" "I heard plenty," the man interrupted. "My wife and I were considering purchasing from this dealership. But after witnessing this, I'm having second thoughts." His wife, a petite woman with silver-streaked hair, nodded in agreement as she joined him. The young lady was very polite despite how she was being treated. Maya's husband thanked them with a nod before turning his attention back to Victoria. "Is the manager available now?" he asked, his voice level but firm. Victoria glanced desperately around the showroom as if hoping for rescue. When none came, she nodded stiffly. "I'll get him right away." As Victoria hurried toward the back offices, Maya's husband knelt beside her chair. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, genuine concern in his eyes. "You didn't have to stay if you were uncomfortable." Maya squeezed his hand. "I'm fine. Just tired of dealing with people like her." She paused, then added with a small smile, "Though I'll admit I was looking forward to seeing her face when you walked in." He chuckled softly. "I'm sorry I was late. Traffic was terrible leaving downtown." "Mr. Johnson?" A deep voice interrupted them. Maya and her husband looked up to see a middle-aged man in an expensive suit approaching them. His nameplate identified him as Richard Taylor, general manager. Victoria trailed behind him, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "I understand there may have been a misunderstanding with one of our sales associates," Richard said smoothly. He extended his hand to Maya's husband. "David Johnson, correct? CEO of Future Tech Solutions?" Maya fought the urge to roll her eyes. Of course, now that they knew who her husband was, the treatment would change dramatically. "Yes," David confirmed, standing to shake the manager's hand. "But the issue isn't about me. It's about how my wife was treated before I arrived." Richard turned to Maya, offering the first genuine smile she'd received since entering the dealership. "Mrs. Johnson, I sincerely apologize if your experience wasn't everything it should have been. At Prestige Motors, we pride ourselves on providing exceptional service to all our customers." "All your customers?" Maya repeated, raising an eyebrow. Because it seemed like Victoria here had decided I wasn't a real customer before she even spoke to me. Victoria stared at the floor. Her earlier confidence completely evaporated. The older couple who had spoken up earlier now approached again. "We were witnesses to the whole thing," the woman said firmly. "This young saleswoman," she gestured to Victoria, was dismissive and condescending from the start. She suggested that the young lady might be more comfortable looking at cheaper cars, her husband added. Made assumptions about her financial situation based on nothing but her appearance. Richard's professional smile faltered. "I see, that's very concerning to hear." By now, several other customers had stopped pretending not to listen and were openly watching the confrontation. A few were whispering among themselves, and one young man was typing rapidly on his phone, possibly sharing the scene on social media. "Perhaps we could discuss this in my office," Richard suggested, clearly aware of the growing audience. "I'm quite comfortable here," David replied. "Unless Maya would prefer privacy?" Maya shook her head. "No, I'm fine right here." There was something satisfying about having this conversation in the open, where other customers could hear how the dealership had treated her. David nodded. "Then let's continue. Victoria seemed to think my wife wouldn't qualify for financing on this vehicle. She directed her to look at used economy cars instead, without even discussing budget or needs. She refused to answer basic questions about safety features, and apparently she implied that a test drive would require credit checks and proof of income first. "Which isn't our policy," Richard quickly clarified, shooting a sharp look at Victoria. "We do require a valid driver's license for test drives, but there's no credit check required to simply test a vehicle." "So she lied to my wife," David stated flatly. Victoria finally spoke up, her voice small. "I was just trying to direct Mrs. Johnson to vehicles that might better suit her needs. Many customers appreciate guidance based on our experience. But you didn't ask about my needs," Maya pointed out. "You made assumptions based on how I look. Would you have treated me the same way if I'd walked in wearing designer clothes instead of this comfortable outfit?" Victoria had no answer for that. A young salesman who had been watching the exchange approached cautiously. "Mr. Taylor, if it's all right, I'd be happy to assist Mr. and Mrs. Johnson with the information they were looking for." Richard nodded gratefully at the lifeline. "This is Raj, one of our top product specialists. He can answer any questions you have about the vehicle you're interested in." "Thank you, but that's not really addressing the issue, is it?" David said. "The problem isn't that we couldn't get information about the car. The problem is how my wife was treated because of assumptions made about her." The showroom had grown so quiet that the soft background music seemed suddenly loud. Other salespeople pretended to be busy with paperwork or their phones, but everyone was clearly listening. "You're absolutely right," Richard admitted after a moment. "And on behalf of Prestige Motors, I want to offer my deepest apologies to Mrs. Johnson." He turned to Maya. "What happened today falls far short of our standards. And there's no excuse for it," Maya nodded, acknowledging his words but not quite ready to accept the apology. "What are you going to do about it? Because I'm sure I'm not the first person who's been judged when walking through those doors." Richard looked uncomfortable. "We take these matters very seriously. I can assure you that there will be consequences and that we'll use this as an opportunity to review our customer service protocols." "Vague corporate speak," David commented. "What specific action will you take to ensure this doesn't happen again? Not just with us, but with anyone who walks through your doors?" The older couple who had spoken up nodded in approval at David's question. The husband added, "We'd be interested to know that too before we decide whether to do business here." Richard seemed to realize that this situation could affect more than just the potential sale to the Johnsons. Several other customers were watching intently, clearly waiting for his response. "Victoria will be removed from the sales floor immediately," he said firmly. "We'll be implementing additional training for all staff on unconscious bias and customer service standards. And I'd like to extend an invitation to Mrs. Johnson to provide feedback on how we can improve." Victoria looked up, shock and dismay clear on her face. "But I've been the top salesperson here for 3 years. And today you've cost us at least 2 sales that I know of," Richard replied, gesturing to the Johnsons and the older couple. "Possibly more, depending on how many people hear about this incident." Maya shifted in her seat, feeling the baby move again. Despite the satisfying turn of events, she was getting tired and uncomfortable. David noticed immediately and placed a supportive hand on her shoulder. "I think we've made our point," he said quietly to her. "Do you want to continue looking at the car or leave?" Maya considered for a moment. Part of her wanted to walk out and never return, but another part thought about the message that would send, that people like her weren't welcome in places like this, and she had accepted that reality. "I'd still like to look at the car," she decided. "With someone else helping us, of course." David smiled proudly at her resilience. He turned to Richard. "We'll work with Raj, but this isn't over. I expect a formal plan addressing these issues to be sent to my office by the end of the week. My company buys its executive fleet from Prestige Motors' parent company. That's a relationship worth several $1 million annually that I'm now reconsidering." Richard's eyes widened slightly at this new information. "Of course, Mr. Johnson. I'll personally oversee the development of that plan." As Victoria was escorted to the back offices and Raj eagerly approached with the correct brochures and information, the older couple came over once more. "We just wanted to say how impressed we are with how you both handled this situation," the woman said warmly to Maya. "It would have been easy to just walk out, but you stayed and spoke up. That takes courage." "Thank you," Maya replied, genuinely touched by their support. "It shouldn't take courage to shop for a car, though." "No, it shouldn't," the man agreed. "But things only change when brave people stand their ground." He extended his hand to David. "Lawrence Thompson, by the way. And this is my wife, Patricia." As David shook their hands and introduced himself and Maya properly, she felt a wave of unexpected emotion. The confrontation had been uncomfortable, even humiliating at times, but maybe something good would come from it. Not just for her and David, but for others who might walk into this dealership in the future. Raj approached with a tablet showing the car's specifications. "Mrs. Johnson, I understand you were interested in the safety features. This model has received the highest possible ratings in all crash tests. Let me show you the advanced driver assistance system." As he enthusiastically detailed the car's features, Maya caught David's eye and they shared a small smile. The afternoon hadn't gone as planned, but perhaps it had gone exactly as needed. Raj guided Maya and David through the luxury sedan's features with genuine enthusiasm. His knowledge was impressive, answering Maya's questions about safety systems without hesitation. Unlike Victoria, he spoke directly to Maya rather than focusing solely on her husband. "The collision avoidance system uses radar and cameras to detect potential accidents before they happen," Raj explained, pointing to a diagram on his tablet. "It can automatically apply the brakes if it senses an imminent collision." Maya nodded, resting her hand on her belly. "That's exactly what we need with the baby coming." "What about side impact protection?" "One of the best in its class," Raj said. The car has reinforced door panels and side curtain airbags that deploy in milliseconds. He glanced at Maya's pregnant belly with a genuine smile. When are you due? About 4 weeks, Maya replied, appreciating his friendly but professional demeanor. David examined the vehicle's interior, testing the spaciousness of the back seat. There's plenty of room for a car seat back here, and the latch system looks easy to use. As they continued discussing the car, the showroom gradually returned to normal. Other customers resumed their own shopping, though occasional glances were still thrown their way. Richard Taylor, the general manager, kept a watchful eye on the proceedings from a distance, clearly anxious to ensure the Johnsons received proper treatment. Lawrence and Patricia Thompson, the older couple who had spoken up, were now working with another salesperson but gave Maya an encouraging thumbs up across the showroom. Would you like to take it for a test drive? Raj offered after they'd gone over all the vehicle's specifications. We have this exact model in the same color ready to go. All I need is your driver's license. Maya exchanged glances with David. Actually, I'm a bit tired. Could we come back tomorrow for the test drive? Of course, Raj replied immediately. I can put a hold on the vehicle to ensure it's available. Would morning or afternoon work better for you? Before Maya could answer, the showroom doors opened again, and a striking woman in a tailored business suit walked in. Her confident stride and air of authority immediately drew attention. She scanned the space and, spotting Richard, headed straight for him. That's Diane Powell, Raj whispered. She's the regional director for all the Prestige Motors dealerships in the state. We don't usually see her unless something big is happening. Maya and David watched as Richard's expression shifted from professional politeness to barely concealed anxiety as he greeted Diane. Their conversation was hushed but intense, with Richard gesturing subtly toward where Maya and David stood with Raj. I wonder if someone called her about what happened, David murmured. Word travels fast, Maya replied, watching as Diane nodded curtly to Richard before turning and walking directly toward them. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, Diane said as she approached, her hand extended. I'm Diane Powell, Regional Director for Prestige Motors. May I have a moment of your time? David shook her hand. Of course. I've just been informed about the situation that occurred here today, Diane continued. First, I want to personally apologize for your experience. What happened is absolutely unacceptable and does not reflect the values of our company. Maya appreciated the direct approach. Thank you for acknowledging that. Diane nodded. This isn't just about making things right with you, though. That's certainly important. This is about ensuring nothing like this happens to anyone else who walks through our doors. That's our concern as well, David said. I mentioned to Mr. Taylor that I expected a formal plan addressing these issues. And you'll have it, Diane assured him. But I'd like to go further than that. Mrs. Johnson, we could benefit greatly from your perspective. Would you consider consulting with us on our customer service training program? We're willing to compensate you for your time, of course. Maya blinked in surprise. You want me to help train your staff? Who better? Diane asked. You've experienced firsthand how our current approach falls short. Your insights would be invaluable. Maya considered the offer. I have a background in human resources, she said slowly. Before I took maternity leave, I was developing diversity and inclusion training for my company. Diane's eyes lit up. That's perfect. Even better than I'd hoped. David looked at Maya with pride. She won the Regional HR Excellence Award last year for her training program. I'd need to see a genuine commitment to change, Maya said. Not just a one-time training session that everyone forgets about a week later. Absolutely, Diane agreed. We're thinking of a comprehensive program. Initial training followed by regular refreshers, changes to our hiring practices, updates to our customer service protocols, and ongoing assessment. Maya felt the baby kick, as if encouraging her to accept the challenge. I'd want to start with focus groups. Hear directly from your staff about their experiences and perceptions. That can be arranged, Diane said. And I'd want Victoria involved, Maya added, surprising even herself with the statement. David raised an eyebrow. Are you sure about that? Maya nodded. People like Victoria don't change by being punished and pushed aside. They change when they're forced to confront their biases and see the impact of their actions. Diane looked impressed. That's a very enlightened perspective. It's a practical one, Maya corrected. If she's been your top salesperson for 3 years, She has influence with the rest of the staff. Better to have her as an advocate for change than a resentful example. Lawrence Thompson approached them, having overheard part of the conversation. I couldn't help overhearing. I think that's an excellent approach, Mrs. Johnson. Patricia joined him. Lawrence was a corporate trainer for 30 years before retiring. He always said the best way to change a company culture is to convert your resistors into champions. Diane turned to the Thompsons with interest. That's very insightful. Maya has always been good at seeing the bigger picture, David said proudly. It's one of the reasons she's so successful in her field. Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest at her husband's words. Despite the unpleasantness of the day, something positive might come from it after all. Well, Raj said, clearing his throat gently, while you all discuss these important changes, can I get you anything? Water, coffee? Mrs. Johnson, we have some comfortable chairs in the customer lounge if you'd like to rest. Maya realized she had been standing for quite a while and her back was beginning to ache. A chair and some water would be wonderful, thank you. As Raj led them to the lounge area, Maya noticed Victoria watching from the doorway of the back offices. Their eyes met briefly, and Maya was surprised to see not anger or resentment, but uncertainty in the other woman's expression. Once Maya was settled comfortably with a glass of water, Diane continued their conversation. I'd like to arrange a meeting next week to discuss the details of your involvement. If you're willing, let's wait until after the baby comes, David suggested, placing a protective hand on Maya's shoulder. She needs to focus on her health right now. Of course, Diane agreed quickly. After the baby, whenever you're ready. In the meantime, we'll begin implementing some immediate changes based on today's events. Such as, Maya prompted. For starters, a new mystery shopper program using diverse testers, Diane said, and an immediate review of our sales protocols to remove any language that might encourage profiling customers. That's a good beginning, Maya acknowledged. Lawrence Thompson, who had joined them in the lounge with Patricia, nodded approvingly. If you don't mind an old man's suggestion, you might also consider a community open house. Invite people from all walks of life to come see what you offer. Break down those invisible barriers. Diane looked thoughtful. That's an excellent idea, Mr. Thompson. Would you be willing to share more of your thoughts as well? As the conversation continued, Maya felt the baby shift position. She placed her hand on her belly, thinking about the world her child would be born into. A world that still had people like Victoria, yes, but also people like Diane, Lawrence, and Patricia, people willing to speak up and make changes. Richard Taylor approached their group, looking both professional and slightly nervous. Mrs. Johnson, I want to apologize again for your experience today. I've spoken with Victoria, and she's asked if she could apologize to you personally before you leave. Maya exchanged glances with David, who gave her a subtle nod of support. I'd be willing to hear what she has to say. Richard nodded and stepped away, returning moments later with Victoria. The saleswoman looked markedly different from the confident, dismissive person who had first approached Maya. Her shoulders were slightly hunched, and she avoided meeting anyone's eyes directly. Mrs. Johnson, Victoria began, her voice quiet but steady. I want to apologize for how I treated you today. My behavior was unprofessional and discriminatory. She seemed to struggle with the last word but forced herself to say it. There's no excuse for making assumptions about customers based on appearance. Maya studied her for a moment. The apology seemed rehearsed but not entirely insincere. Thank you for acknowledging that, Victoria. I appreciate the apology. Victoria nodded stiffly. Ms. Powell mentioned that you might be helping with some training for our staff. I want you to know that I'm willing to participate in that process. I'm glad to hear it, Maya replied, because change only happens when people are willing to examine their own biases. Victoria's eyes finally met Maya's directly. I've never thought of myself as prejudiced. It's uncomfortable to face that possibility. Growth is usually uncomfortable, Maya said simply. A flicker of respect crossed Victoria's face before she nodded once more and stepped back. Diane watched the exchange with approval. I think we're already making progress. She turned to Maya and David. Now, about that test drive tomorrow, I'd like to offer you our VIP service. We'll bring the vehicle to your home at whatever time is convenient for you. David raised an eyebrow. That's not necessary. We can come back to the dealership. I insist, Diane said. It's the least we can do, especially considering Maya's condition. Maya smiled. That would actually be very helpful. Thank you. As they finalized the arrangements for the next day's test drive, Maya felt a sense of satisfaction. What had begun as a humiliating experience had transformed into something potentially valuable, not just for her and David, but for others who might walk into this dealership in the future. Ready to head home? David asked softly, noticing her stifle a yawn. Maya nodded. It's been quite a day. As they said their goodbyes to Diane, Richard, and the Thompsons, Raj handed Maya his business card. I'll be the one bringing the car tomorrow. If you think of any other questions before then, please call me directly. Thank you, Raj, Maya said sincerely. Your help today made a big difference. As they walked out of the dealership into the late afternoon sunshine, David took Maya's hand. You know, I came in ready to make a scene, he admitted. But you turned it into something constructive. Maya leaned against his shoulder. Sometimes the best way to fight discrimination isn't with anger, but with education and opportunity for change. That's why I married you, David said, kissing the top of her head. You always see the path forward. They reached their car, and as David helped Maya into the passenger seat, she looked back at the dealership. Through the glass doors, she could see Diane speaking animatedly to Richard and several other staff members, already beginning the process of change. You know, Maya said as David slid into the driver's seat beside her. I think our baby is going to grow up in a slightly better world than the one we grew up in. David started the engine. Thanks to people like their mother, who aren't afraid to stand their ground. As they drove away from Prestige Motors, Maya felt the baby kick again. She smiled, placing her hand on her belly. That's right, little one, she whispered. Sometimes changing the world starts with simply refusing to be invisible. 2 weeks had passed since the incident at Prestige Motors. Maya sat in the nursery of their home, gently rocking in the cushioned chair David had surprised her with last weekend. The room was peaceful, painted in soft yellows with white furniture and small woodland creatures decorating the walls. She ran her hand over her rounded belly, feeling the baby shift inside her. The test drive had gone smoothly the day after the showroom confrontation. True to her word, Diane had arranged for Raj to deliver the midnight blue sedan directly to their driveway. He had patiently walked them through all the features again, and accompanied them on a relaxed drive around their neighborhood. By the end of the test, both Maya and David were convinced it was the perfect family car, but they hadn't signed the papers that day. Instead, they told Raj they needed time to consider their options. The truth was, Maya wanted to see if Prestige Motors would follow through on their promises of change before giving them their business. The sound of the front door opening pulled Maya from her thoughts. I'm home, David called from downstairs. In the nursery, she called back. Moments later, David appeared in the doorway, his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. Despite the long workday, his face brightened when he saw her. How are my two favorite people doing today? He asked, crossing the room to kiss her forehead. We're good, Maya replied, taking his hand and placing it on her belly where the baby was kicking. Active today. David grinned as he felt the movement. Future soccer player, maybe? Or dancer, Maya suggested. He pulled the ottoman closer and sat facing her. So I got an interesting email today from Diane Powell. Maya straightened slightly. Oh, what did it say? She sent over the formal plan we requested. He pulled his tablet from his briefcase and opened the document. It's actually quite comprehensive. Want to see? Maya took the tablet and began scrolling through the detailed proposal. It outlined a complete overhaul of Prestige Motors' hiring practices, customer service protocols, and staff training. There were specific sections addressing unconscious bias, inclusive language, and metrics for measuring improvement. This is actually impressive, Maya admitted. They've even included a timeline for implementation and a budget allocation. David nodded. I had our legal team review it. They say it's solid, not just corporate window dressing. Maya handed the tablet back to him. Have they started implementing any of it yet? That's the other thing Diane mentioned in her email, David said. They've already held 2 all-staff meetings to discuss the changes. And, he paused, looking slightly amused. Apparently, Victoria has volunteered to lead one of the internal focus groups. Maya's eyebrows shot up. Victoria, really? According to Diane, she's been surprisingly receptive. Said something about not wanting to be on the wrong side of history. He shrugged. People can surprise you sometimes. Maya said thoughtfully. Maybe our little confrontation actually got through to her. Maybe, David agreed. Or maybe she just doesn't want to lose her job. Either way, it's progress, Maya said. She shifted in the rocking chair, trying to find a more comfortable position. The baby was pressing against her ribs today. David watched her with concern. Back hurting again? A little. Dr. Rodriguez says it's normal at this stage. She looked up at her husband. So what do you think? Should we go ahead with purchasing the car from them? David leaned back, considering. It's your call. You're the one who was mistreated. Maya appreciated that he was giving her the decision. I think we should, she said after a moment. They seem to be making a genuine effort to change. And honestly, I like the idea of our business being tied to that change. It gives them more incentive to follow through. Valid point, David said. Plus, I have to admit that car is exactly what we need. The safety features alone make it worth it, Maya agreed. And I'd rather work with Raj than start the whole process over at another dealership. I'll call him tomorrow then, David said, reaching over to take her hand. Now, how about some dinner? I picked up that spicy Thai food you've been craving on the way home. Maya's mouth watered at the thought. You're the best husband ever. David helped her up from the rocking chair, and they had just reached the doorway when Maya's phone rang. She glanced at the screen. It's Diane Powell, she said, surprised. At this hour? David checked his watch. It was after 7 in the evening. Maya answered the call, putting it on speaker. Hello, Diane. Maya, I hope I'm not disturbing you. Diane's voice came through clearly. I wanted to call personally rather than email. I've just come from a meeting with our board of directors. Maya and David exchanged glances. Is everything okay? Maya asked. Better than okay, Diane replied, and they could hear the smile in her voice. The board has unanimously approved our diversity and inclusion initiative. But here's the really good news. They want to implement it company-wide across all 50 dealerships in our network. That's wonderful, Maya said sincerely. It is, Diane agreed. But it also means we need more help than we initially thought. Maya, they've authorized me to offer you a formal consulting position. This would be a legitimate contract with appropriate compensation to help us develop and roll out the program across the entire company. Maya's jaw dropped. She looked at David, who appeared equally surprised. I wasn't expecting this, Maya stammered. I thought I'd just be helping with some training at your local dealership. This has become much bigger than that, Diane explained. What happened with you was, unfortunately, a perfect case study of what needs to change in our industry. And your background in HR and diversity training makes you uniquely qualified to help us address it systematically. David squeezed Maya's hand supportively. That sounds like an amazing opportunity, he said. It would be, Diane continued. But I understand completely if the timing isn't right with the baby coming. We could delay the start date or structure it to accommodate your schedule. I just wanted you to know the offer is on the table. Maya's mind raced with possibilities. She had been planning to take 6 months of maternity leave before returning to her HR director position. But this consulting opportunity could potentially be done on a flexible schedule, allowing her to both spend time with the baby and contribute to meaningful change. Can I think about it? Maya asked. Discuss it with David and get back to you? Of course, Diane replied. Take all the time you need. And regardless of your decision about the consulting role, I hope you'll still consider purchasing from us. Raj mentioned you were particularly interested in the midnight blue sedan. We were just discussing that actually, Maya said. I think we're ready to move forward with the purchase. Excellent. I'll have Raj bring all the paperwork to you tomorrow. No need for you to come back to the dealership in your condition. After a few more details were arranged, Maya ended the call and looked at David in amazement. Did that really just happen? She asked. David laughed. It really did. How do you feel about it? Maya placed her hands on her belly, feeling the baby move again. Honestly, I'm excited. This isn't how I expected my maternity leave to go, but the idea of creating change at that scale is incredibly appealing. You'd be amazing at it, David said with complete confidence, and I'm fully on board if it's what you want to do. We can work out the logistics with childcare and schedules. You wouldn't mind if I took on a consulting project with a newborn? Maya, David said gently. You've supported every one of my career moves, including the crazy hours when we were launching the company. This is important work that you're uniquely qualified to do. Of course I support it. Maya felt tears welling up, which happened easily these days with her pregnancy hormones. I love you, you know that? I know, he said, pulling her into a careful hug. I love you too. As they headed downstairs for dinner, Maya marveled at how quickly life could change. Just 2 weeks ago, she had walked into a car dealership and been judged, dismissed, and humiliated. Now that same company wanted her expertise to help transform their entire corporate culture. It's kind of incredible, she said as David dished out the fragrant Thai food. If Victoria hadn't been so awful to me that day, none of this would have happened. David passed her a plate. Sometimes the most difficult experiences lead to the most unexpected opportunities. I just hope it leads to real change, Maya said, spearing a piece of spicy chicken. Not just for us, but for everyone who walks into one of their dealerships. If anyone can make that happen, it's you, David said with complete faith in his voice. Maya smiled, feeling the baby kick again as if in agreement. The confrontation at the dealership had been uncomfortable, even painful, but maybe it had happened for a reason. Maybe this was exactly where she was meant to be, using that difficult experience to create something positive. You know what? She said suddenly. I think I'm going to accept Diane's offer. David raised his water glass in a toast. To my brilliant wife, changing the world one car dealership at a time. Maya laughed and clinked her glass against his. And to our baby, who's already helping make the world a better place before even being born. Outside their dining room window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in beautiful shades of orange and purple. Maya felt a deep sense of contentment and purpose. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, tonight she was grateful for the unexpected turns life had taken, even the difficult ones. 3 months had passed since the incident at Prestige Motors. The early morning sunlight streamed through the nursery window, casting a warm glow on Maya as she gently rocked her 6-week-old daughter, Lily. The baby had finally fallen asleep after her 5 a.m. feeding, her tiny face peaceful against Maya's chest. There you go, sweet girl, Maya whispered, carefully rising from the rocking chair. She placed Lily in her crib, holding her breath as the baby stirred slightly before settling back into sleep. Maya tiptoed out of the nursery and gently pulled the door halfway closed. In the hallway, she stretched, feeling the lingering soreness in her body. Childbirth had been harder than she'd expected, but the joy of having Lily in their lives made every difficult moment worthwhile. The house was quiet this early in the morning. David was still asleep in their bedroom, having taken the midnight feeding so Maya could get a few hours of uninterrupted rest. Their new routine was exhausting, but had brought them closer together as they navigated the challenges of new parenthood. Maya made her way downstairs to the kitchen, starting a pot of coffee. While it brewed, she pulled out her laptop and sat at the kitchen island. She had a video conference scheduled for 10 a.m. with Diane Powell and the team at Prestige Motors. In the weeks following Lily's birth, Maya had begun working on the consulting project, starting with reviewing their current policies and training materials. The midnight blue luxury sedan sat in their driveway, purchased as planned. Every time Maya looked at it, she felt a strange mix of emotions. The sting of her initial treatment at the dealership, but also pride in the changes that had resulted from that difficult day. The coffee maker beeped, and Maya poured herself a cup, adding a splash of cream. She opened her email to find several new messages from Diane, including the agenda for today's meeting and some promising statistics from their first round of training sessions. Maya clicked through the presentation slides Diane had sent. The data showed a marked improvement in customer satisfaction scores across demographics in the 3 dealerships where they'd piloted the new training program. It wasn't perfect. Change never happened overnight. But it was a solid start. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Victoria of all people. That was still something. Maya was getting used to, and the fact that the saleswoman, who had discriminated against her, was now one of the most enthusiastic supporters of the diversity initiative. Reviewed. The focus group feedback. Lots of good insights to discuss in today's meeting. Looking forward to seeing you on the call. Maya smiled slightly. Victoria's transformation hadn't happened immediately. Their first meeting after the incident had been tense and awkward. But over time, as Victoria participated in the training sessions and focus groups, something had shifted. The woman had begun to recognize her own biases and, more importantly, seemed genuinely committed to addressing them. The sound of footsteps on the stairs pulled Maya from her thoughts. David appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair tousled from sleep, Lily cradled carefully in his arms. "Someone woke up and was looking for her mom," he said, stifling a yawn. "But I just put her down," Maya said. Setting aside her laptop, David smiled tiredly. "Welcome to parenthood. Time is meaningless and sleep is a distant memory." Maya laughed, taking Lily from him. The baby blinked up at her with dark eyes, not fussing, just seemingly curious about the world around her. "Good morning, little one." Maya cooed. "You're supposed to be sleeping. Mommy has a big meeting today." David poured himself some coffee. "The diversity initiative call, right? How's that coming along?" "Better than I expected, honestly," Maya replied, gently bouncing Lily in her arms. "The pilot program is showing good results. And you won't believe this, Victoria is turning out to be one of our biggest advocates." David raised his eyebrows. "The same Victoria who tried to direct you to the used car section? That's quite a turnaround." "I know. I was skeptical at first too, but she seems genuinely committed." Maya adjusted Lily to her shoulder, patting her back gently. "She told me last week that she never thought of herself as prejudiced before, but the training made her realize how many assumptions she was making about customers based on their appearance." "People can change," David said, leaning against the counter. "Sometimes they just need the right motivation and opportunity." Maya nodded. "And having her on board has actually been incredibly helpful. She has credibility with the sales staff in a way that Diane and I don't. When she speaks about the importance of treating all customers with respect, they listen." "So what's on the agenda for today's meeting?" "We're discussing expanding the pilot to 10 more dealerships next month," Maya explained, "and reviewing the feedback from the first round of mystery shoppers." David smiled proudly. "Look at you, changing corporate culture while caring for a newborn. You're amazing, you know that?" Maya laughed. "I'm exhausted is what I am, but it feels good to be making a difference." She looked down at Lily. "And I like that she'll grow up seeing her mom doing meaningful work." "Speaking of which," David said, glancing at his watch, "I should get ready for my own meeting. The board wants to discuss that potential acquisition today." "I can handle Lily," Maya assured him. "She'll probably fall back asleep soon." After David went upstairs to shower, Maya settled on the living room couch with Lily on her lap and her laptop beside her. As predicted, the baby's eyes soon grew heavy, and she drifted off to sleep. Maya carefully shifted her to the bassinet they kept downstairs and returned to her work. By the time 10 a.m. rolled around, Maya was freshly showered, dressed in a professional top, paired with yoga pants below the camera's view, and ready for the video conference. Lily was miraculously still napping. He and David had left for his office after kissing them both goodbye. Maya clicked to join the meeting, and soon her screen filled with familiar faces. Diane Powell in the center, flanked by Richard Taylor and several other Prestige Motors executives. Victoria's face appeared in one of the smaller windows at the bottom of the screen. "Maya, wonderful to see you," Diane greeted warmly. "How's the little one doing?" "She's great," Maya replied with a smile. "Currently taking a rare nap, so let's make the most of this time before she wakes up." The meeting proceeded smoothly as they discussed the results from the pilot program. The data was encouraging. Customer satisfaction scores had improved across all demographic groups, and there had been a 15% increase in completed sales to minority customers. "The mystery shopper program has been particularly revealing," Richard commented. "Having people of different backgrounds test our salespeople's responses has shown us blind spots we didn't even know existed. Victoria, do you want to share what you've learned from the focus groups?" Diane prompted. Victoria's face grew larger on the screen as she began to speak. "The biggest revelation from the sales team focus groups is how many of our practices were unknowingly built around assumptions," she explained, her tone professional and engaged. "For example, many of us were trained to qualify customers quickly based on appearance, how they dress, what they drive up in, even how they speak. We were taught this was efficiency, but really it was profiling." Maya nodded. "That's consistent with what we've seen across the industry. These aren't just individual biases. They're often baked into training and incentive structures." "Exactly," Victoria agreed. "And changing those structures is what's making the real difference." When salespeople aren't penalized for spending time with customers who don't make an immediate purchase, they're more likely to treat everyone with equal respect and attention. The discussion continued productively, with plans made to expand the program to additional dealerships. As they were wrapping up, a small cry came through Maya's microphone. "I think that's my cue," she said with a smile. "Lily's awake." "Bring her on camera before we go," Diane requested. "We'd love to see her." Maya stepped away briefly and returned with Lily, who had calmed down as soon as she was picked up. She held the baby up so the camera could capture her face. "Oh, she's beautiful," Richard said, his usually formal demeanor softening. Victoria leaned closer to her camera. "Those cheeks." "She's adorable, Maya." "Thank you," Maya replied, feeling the familiar surge of pride and love as she looked at her daughter. "She's why this work matters so much to me. I want her to grow up in a world where she's never judged by the color of her skin." The mood on the call grew more reflective. "I think about that day you came into our showroom a lot," Victoria said quietly. "How differently I treated you based on nothing but assumptions. I'm grateful you stood your ground and that you've been willing to work with us instead of just walking away." "Sometimes the hardest experiences lead to the most important growth," Maya replied, "both personally and professionally." After the call ended, Maya sat with Lily in the rocking chair by the living room window. Outside, their midnight blue sedan gleamed in the driveway, a constant reminder of both discrimination faced and progress made. "You know, little one," she whispered to Lily, "that car out there has quite a story behind it. Someday I'll tell you all about how it helped start something important. How standing up for yourself can sometimes change more than just your own situation." The baby gazed up at her with those dark, curious eyes as if absorbing her mother's words. The doorbell rang, startling Maya from her thoughts. She wasn't expecting anyone. Adjusting Lily in her arms, she went to answer it. Through the peephole, she was surprised to see Lawrence and Patricia Thompson, the older couple who had spoken up for her at the dealership that day. "Lawrence, Patricia?" She greeted them warmly as she opened the door. "What a lovely surprise." "We hope we're not intruding," Patricia said, her kind eyes immediately going to Lily. "Oh my, is this the little one? She's precious." "Please come in." Maya stepped back to let them enter. "What brings you by?" Lawrence held up a small gift bag. "We wanted to bring something for the baby, and to share some news we thought you'd appreciate." Once they were settled in the living room, Patricia carefully holding Lily, who seemed perfectly content in the older woman's arms, Lawrence explained their visit. "We finally purchased a new car last week," he said. "From Prestige Motors." Maya's eyebrows raised. "Really? How was your experience?" "Remarkably different," Patricia said. "The entire atmosphere of the place has changed. We worked with Raj, such a delightful young man. But we also noticed how the other salespeople were interacting with customers. There was a genuine respect that was missing before." Lawrence nodded in agreement. "And the most surprising part? Victoria was there, and she came over specifically to say hello. She remembered us from that day and thanked us for speaking up." "That's wonderful to hear," Maya said sincerely. "We wanted you to know that what you started there is making a real difference," Patricia said, gently rocking Lily. "Sometimes standing up against discrimination feels like shouting into the wind. You wonder if anything really changes. But this time, it has." Maya felt a wave of emotion as she looked at this kind couple who had stood by her side when she needed support, at her beautiful daughter sleeping peacefully, and thought about the ripple effects of that difficult day at the dealership. "Thank you for telling me that," she said softly. "It means more than you know." As they chatted over coffee, sharing stories and cooing over Lily, Maya felt a deep sense of gratitude. What had begun as a humiliating experience had transformed into something powerful. Not just a personal victory, but the beginning of real systemic change. Later, after the Thompsons had left and Maya was alone again with Lily, she stood by the window looking out at the car that had started it all. "You know what, Lily?" she whispered to her sleeping daughter. "Sometimes the hardest moments lead us exactly where we need to be. And sometimes standing your ground can change more than just your own path. It can help clear the way for others too." Outside, the sun shone brightly on the midnight blue sedan, transforming what had once been a symbol of discrimination into something new, a reminder that change was possible, that speaking up mattered, and that even the most difficult experiences could lead to unexpected blessings.